Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. Here I am talking to Karen Steiner. Karen has an amazing story about how and we'll get into all the details, of course, but she lost, I believe it's 90 pounds over the course of going whole food plant-based, but also was able to fight not only her obesity, but also a lot of health issues as well with some depression. So we'll talk about all of that because I think she's got a story that is not necessarily, sadly, unique to a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people that deal with all of these challenges. So thanks for joining us, Karen.
Well, glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I'd love to just start with what is your story and how all this came to be, like where you started from. I know you mentioned that you started dieting at the age of 9 years old.
Yeah, I did. By the time I was in kindergarten, I started getting teased about being fat. Even though you look at the pictures, and I'd be totally normal now today, but for 1963, I was a little chubby. I'm not even sure why I got teased, but I did, and that really just started me on this whole thing where, you're hating your body and you're fighting with food. And I started dieting at 9. And
What's that look like? Like
anorexia at 13.
Oh God. What does a 9-year-old dieting look like?
It was summer, and I think that there was some conspiracy between my parents and a friend's parents, because we were both fairly chubby children and we both lost a lot of weight that summer. So the dieting at 9 wasn't a whole lot of restriction. It was more physical activity and being distracted.
Right.
A lot. And being kind of not sort of not having food as being kind of the center of every activity. So it wasn't like that 9-year-old diet wasn't like I was starving myself, like I had
Right.
done, then I started starving myself at like 13. But it was definitely, I can remember standing in front of the mirror in my bathing suit with my friend, and we're looking, saying, look, our ribs are showing.
And going back, we're healthy.
Yeah. And I got to school and everybody was like, oh my gosh, you look so great. And well, of course, that lasted about 2 or 3 months. And the next thing you know, all the weight was back and then some, because that's what happens when you go on a diet. So
it's interesting. I have an 11-year-old daughter who has a very athletic frame. Mm-hmm. Right. And even like I see her at this age and it terrifies me because she has evenings where she's upset and she's like, I want to look like my friends look. And like, luckily now we have the knowledge to look at people and go, human beings have different body types. Mm-hmm. Some people they're just stockier frames. You're never going to have that lean, slender frame because you're just not, that your DNA didn't give you that.
Yeah.
And so, and we're lucky enough that I have younger cousins that are, in between my age and her age. And I'm able to look at her. I'm like, look at them. Like, they're gorgeous and beautiful. And they're like full framed women who are more athletic, but it doesn't, you just need to buy clothes that are designed for you and not designed for them, and stop comparing yourself to those girls that you're never going to be able to match.
Right.
But of course, when I grew up in the 80s, and we certainly didn't have that. It was just like, this was like the cliched version of what beautiful is.
Oh, hey, I was growing up in the 60s when it was Twiggy.
Yeah.
It was like,
even worse.
That was awful. Yeah.
Yeah. So. No. And they didn't even have Photoshop back then the way.
We didn't even dream of Photoshop.
No. So walk me through that. So, with as much as you're comfortable with, obviously. So you're 13 years old and anorexia is kicking in. Like, what's like, how did you, so walk me through like that up until like, into your adult years and kind of
okay.
what
I'll hit
like.
the high points.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started dieting sensibly. So I thought, at 13, I started out on 1,000 calories a day, which I thought was totally reasonable. In fact, my mother was like, yeah, you should eat 1,000 calories a day would be good for you. So I was counting my calories, but gradually I started tweaking them down. And of course, like for breakfast, it was cereal with skim milk and a half a grapefruit. And then for lunch, oh God, I can't, this lunch, white bread, like a piece of Wonder Bread with butter and a hard boiled egg.
For lunch.
And then whatever the family was having for dinner that night. I was hungry all the time. I was starving. But what I did was I went down to, I left off the milk on my cereal. And then I stopped eating the grapefruit. And then I stopped eating the bread. It was sort of like at lunch. It was just, I got down to about 800 calories a day. And truthfully, I couldn't, I was a failure at being an anorexic because I couldn't put up with the stomach aches and the headaches. It was pretty awful. And I think a really sad thing now is teenagers who are going through that can go online and get all these support groups for people who are being anorexic. And I'm wondering if that had been available to me, I probably would have done it. Because at that point, I was feeling like that was what I wanted to do.
Well, I think it was just we're lucky to be in this era now where it's like things like this they're not considered taboo to talk about too, right? Like people were encouraged to talk about these things, and where back then it was just like, well, we just don't talk about it. It's a thing that.
Oh, I don't think anorexia was even a word in vocabulary at that point. I think I was in high school when I learned that word. So yeah, it was, and unfortunately, but I lost quite a bit of weight, and everybody was telling me how wonderful I looked. And then of course, within a year, it was all back because, and then I lost weight again in high school. And by college, I would say by my junior year in college, it was all back again. And then I even got heavier. And then I lost weight in graduate school. And that was the exercise bulimia, which it means, when you're 25, you can do that. You can still outrun a bad diet. And so I could buy a bag of potato chips or a bag of Doritos and eat the whole thing and go out and run several miles a day and still lose weight.
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing. And, you can do that at 25, but the older you get, it doesn't work anymore. So,
no.
And I'm going to fast forward to about 10 years or so ago, because I was 220 pounds and I'm only 4'11". So, I mean, that's a BMI of 44.
Yeah.
That's morbidly obese. And my knees were killing me. Absolutely killing me. I'd go to the grocery store and I'd lean on the cart just to get some weight off my knees. And I knew it was weight that was causing them. But then I got this idea that I was going to walk the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. I was going to walk 500 miles across northern Spain, and that was going to get me in shape. and I'd have to train for it. Right. And then, of course, I started doing the training, and I couldn't do it because I couldn't move. I couldn't walk for long periods of time. And I realized that, you just get to a point where you're in this downward spiral and you can't do any real substantial exercise because you're starting to hurt, but you're hurting because you're not doing the exercise and you're not moving. And so that's when I kind of was like, that's one of the many aha moments I had. I'd also like to backtrack just a little bit because, I am a wellness and weight loss coach, but I'm also consider myself a food activist. And when I was about 25, I read a book called Diet for a Small Planet. And that was the first book that, first of all, I went vegetarian immediately. I mean, I was still doing eggs and dairy, but it made me realize that the food choices that we make have much bigger impact than just on our own bodies. There's a whole food system out there that we're supporting, and we can support factory farms or things that degrade the environment, or we can support things that are much more supportive to everybody. And that kind of got me thinking about how the food that we eat and the choices that we make have a much bigger impact. And that was important to me. Unfortunately, one of my biggest food addictions that I've come to see is cheese. I'm just like super, super addicted to cheese.
That's all people. They're like, I can give up this, I can give up that, I can't give up my cheese.
Yeah. I mean, like, I gave up meat, no problem. I ate it, I liked it, but once I gave it up, I never craved it. I never cared about it. When I gave up eggs years later, it was kind of the same thing. I was never a big deal. I gave up eggs and dairy at the same time. But oh my God, I was dying for a piece of pizza. Like months later, I was still craving it. So, and, as I started, I think, Frances Moore Lappé, when she wrote Diet for a Small Planet, she was like one voice crying in the wilderness. Whereas, starting in like 2000, I don't know, late like 2009 or 10, Michael Pollan started writing about food and food systems. And he was saying a lot of the same things as Frances Moore Lappé was saying. Marion Nestle is also just one of my sheroes, who writes a lot about food politics. And so I started, even though I was seriously obese, I read In Defense of Food. I read Marion Nestle's Food Politics. I read Michael, oh God, what's his name? David Kessler's book on the end of overeating, and he talks a lot about the food industry and how we're being. What?
Not the end of dieting.
The end of overeating.
Okay.
It's not the end of dieting. No, it's the end of overeating.
Book.
And he talks a lot about neuroscience. It's pretty heavy on the neuroscience, but I read that, and then I read Michael Moss' Fat, Sugar, Salt: How the Food Giants Hooked Us, and I got mad. And I got really mad because I realized that I was being manipulated into eating more than I wanted. And that, that this was, and I think that anger was one of the things that really fueled me to start making some real changes. And I'm also an avid reader, I guess you can tell that. But it was Janine Roth introduced me to mindful eating with her book, Women, Food, and God, which was also really, really powerful for me. And suddenly, as I started eating mindfully, and I'll tell you, I had to have some mindful, it's hard to say that I've had some mindful eating binges, but I actually did. And it really helped me see how the addictive process was working in me. If this was more than just me wanting to just keep shoveling food in my mouth and having it be a weakness, like I'd go to a party and I'd park myself next to the food table and I would just eat all evening. And especially if there were chips.
Oh yeah. Oh, I was just thinking that as you said that.
I've embarrassed myself at parties because I couldn't pull myself away from the food table. And I suddenly realized that this was something more in me than just a moral failing, because I think as long as you're beating yourself up and blaming it on yourself, but it was like, oh, this is more than that. I'm really feeling this physiological pull.
Yeah.
To put
for those that don't
in my mouth.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry. For those that don't understand, what is mindful eating?
Mindful eating is taking what I'd learned in my meditation practice, and I'd been doing that for years, and really applying it to mindful eating. It's simply paying attention to the present moment and paying attention to the food you're eating. And it's, a lot of people think that mindful eating, you have to be in this real meditative state and eat slowly and put your fork down. And no, just simply pay attention to what's going on. And it's, like meditation is paying attention to whatever arises. You're never going to turn your thoughts off. You're simply going to stay present with whatever's in the moment. Mm-hmm. And so mindful eating is doing that only while you're eating. And, and paying attention really helped me see that how salt especially, or the common, what I call the holy trinity of fat, sugar, or of fat, salt, and crunch, really just keeps me wanting to get another chip in my mouth.
Yeah.
Once I realized that, this was not something that was ever going to be moderated. It had to go.
Yeah.
And so first the fries and the chips went out of my diet. And, I lost a little bit of weight, and I switched to whole grains. So it was, instead of having white pasta, we had whole wheat pasta. Instead of white rice, we had brown rice. Lost a little bit more weight. And then the dairy. That was a big thing. And there were a couple things. I saw forks over knives. I've been a vegetarian for years. The first time I saw forks over knives, I didn't get it. I didn't get it. I was like, well, I eat like that.
Yeah.
I eat eggs and dairy, but I moderate it. Well, I try to moderate it. I didn't realize until after the fact that when you cut out a little, I'd cut out my little ounce of cheese for the day, and I cut it up into little pieces, and I try to make it last all day, and then my husband would come along and he'd see this little piece of cheese sitting out, and he'd say, "Oh, cheese." And I'd go ballistic. I'd be like, "You ate my cheese." That's all I get. And I don't know how much I've had, so I don't know how much more I get. No, that's addict behavior.
Yeah.
I was like an alcoholic trying to have one drink a day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I went through that phase of counting calories too, where at one point my wife was just like, "You've kind of become a jerk." Like, with the way, like, it's not healthy. You need to stop doing this.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I had to see Forks Over Knives at least twice, if not 3 times. And I watched Dr. Furman's PBS special, and then I think it was, I think it might have been Dr. McDougall. I was something on YouTube that I was watching, and and he said, "Milk is liquid meat." And he said it a couple of times, "Milk is liquid meat." And I was just like, wait a minute. I wouldn't eat a piece of meat. You couldn't pay me enough to eat a piece of meat. And I'm drinking milk and I'm eating cheese. Maybe I should give it up. Can I give it up? Giving up cheese? Now, I went and this is how I got a job on a farm. So I could milk a goat. I would go and milk the goat by hand every morning. And then I'd make cheese. I was making my own cheese and my own yogurt, and they had chickens. So I was collecting eggs, and I'd get these really fresh eggs, and I knew where they came from, and I knew they were organic, and, I was hand milking the goat. So it was raw milk. It was like, and I knew that it was clean because, we had a milking area protocol for keeping everything clean. So, pasteurization really just makes up for filthy farming techniques.
Yeah.
So, but it was like, can I give this up? I'm really passionately invested in this.
Well, it's part of your life.
Yeah. And I thought, you know what? I'll do it for 2 weeks. That's it. I'll give up eggs and dairy for 2 weeks. And I lost 7 pounds and I didn't even have to try. So I kind of said, okay, let's try it for 6 weeks. And by the time I finished with 6 weeks, I mean, I lost another 15 pounds and I was just feeling better. I said, okay, let's give it 6 months just to make sure that this is I'm really onto something. And of course I gave it 6 months. I lost more weight and I was feeling good. And I was like, okay, I'm not going back. There's just no way.
So at this point, are you now off of all animal products?
Yeah, I was off of all animal products at that point. I think at that point I was still putting a tablespoon of goat's milk in my coffee. That was it. But I think it was about 6 or 8 months afterwards, I'd been on antidepressants for about 17 years. And they stopped working like 2013. It was before I went plant-based. And then, so I went off them and things got really bad. I mean, when I went off they stopped working. And then when I went off them completely, on the other hand, I could also see the side effects were just, that's when you finally got them out of my system. I could see how badly the side effects were really, they kind of crept up on me. And it was like, I'm not going back on any more meds. And I was totally shocked when one day I woke up and I kind of found myself, I was still going to the farm and still doing the milking the goat and collecting the eggs and then giving them away. But, I found myself kind of, hauling buckets of water and singing along. And I was like, I feel good. It's like my mood had improved. And it was not something that I'd expected.
Right.
Because this was a lifelong problem that I'd had since elementary.
As long as you remember. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as I can remember. And it's like, all I had to do was give up dairy. It was astounding.
What's amazing how, I think, modern day, we understand more and more, not all of us, sadly, but understand this idea of food as medicine and what we put into our body affects us. Like, we don't think of it. We just go, oh, it just keeps me alive and it's calories.
Yeah.
And I just need a certain amount. How we don't think of it as like, well, the different aspects of it create different things.
Right.
I
want to say one more thing about the depression, because I was interviewed by somebody from the National Institutes of Health. They wanted to interview people who were plant-based. So I volunteered to do that. And, as I talked about the benefits, and he said, well, he's just doing the research and they don't have anything published. But what he had found in his conversations with people, an overwhelming number of people had their depression lifted. They just had a better mood after going whole food plant-based.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, it is.
We have a question here from Grandma Gigi. And they're asking, what do you eat and how? Trying to decipher what they've said. So they said, what do you eat and how much on whole food plant-based, no oil lifestyle? So I guess it boils down to what kind of things are you eating?
Oh, okay. Well, I start the morning with a bowl of oatmeal, and it's whole oat groats that I've cooked with lentils, and I make enough for a week. Make enough, actually, for my husband and I for a week. So I make a big pot in my Instant Pot, and then half of it goes in the freezer, and half of it we eat. And then when that's finished, we pull the other container out and let that thaw.
How much of that mixture are you eating? Like, what's a serving for you?
Oh, for me, it's not a huge serving. It's probably maybe half to 3/4 of a cup. Because I also have a smoothie. Right. So really, I just added the I added the oats because the smoothie, sometimes there's just a little too much liquid in my empty stomach.
Mm.
And I also do intermittent fasting, so I don't even eat until like 9:30. And so I am pretty empty at that point. And if I just have a smoothie, it's just too much liquid. So I have the smoothie. The smoothie is red beets, kale, pineapple, blueberries, a base of hibiscus tea, and flaxseed, chia seeds, dates, and almond powder.
Same every day?
Same every day. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're a creature of habit. I love it.
Well, yeah, and I know exactly how much to put in, and my husband gets half, and I drink the other half. So I mean,
Nice.
he's on board with me. So that's
Yeah.
that's been really nice. Lunch is our main meal of the day, and I always have a big bowl of broccoli, cauliflower, peppers, onions, and mushrooms. I mean, that's always the basis, the basic, and it's a big bowl. And then, you know, I always have, like yesterday I have this, and I actually have a cooking channel on my, and you put a link to it.
Yeah,
I
there's a
hope.
link in the description
Okay.
below. People can click on it right now. Yeah.
Because
Well,
I
not
actually
now.
also do have a video of what how I lost 90 pounds. So I do have a kind of what I eat in a day, and then there are links to all the recipes.
Great.
And I, like yesterday we had tahini lemon sauce on the vegetables, and then I will usually have either potato or rice or some kind of whole grain, but I didn't have any cooked. So we had some whole wheat or some whole corn tortillas. They were just corn and water with a little salt in them. So that's what we flour tortillas. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find them without oil. So and then dinner is usually pretty light. It's either soup or a salad. And in the winter, like it is now on a cold day, it's usually soup. And then as the weather warms up, it'll be, and when I say a salad, I mean, it's like, Dr. Furman, and the salad is the main course, and that's a huge serving bowl size salad.
Nice. And do you, what are your kind of go-to proteins do you add proteins to your salad?
I
guess specific
yeah, usually I make a lot of tofu based dressings.
Okay.
Or I thicken it with beans. So
nice.
The dressing is usually would be like tofu, lemon juice, a little bit of nut butter. I try to keep that to a minimum. And then a clove of garlic and let's see, I said lemon juice, a little bit of water to thin it down a little bit. So that's, or if I don't have tofu, I'll throw in some beans.
Nice.
So, yeah.
We have
and sweet potato.
Sweet potato. Love it. So we have another great question from Marvin. I know Marvin. He's a lovely human being. Hi, Marvin. Thanks for watching. He mentions how we mentioned the Instant Pot here, which is, the whole food plant-based golden tool. One of the golden things. And he was curious, what are some of your other go-to top 3 devices? So if the Instant Pot's one, what are your other
the
two?
Instant Pot is definitely number 1. I couldn't be without it. I love my Vitamix, but I couldn't be without the Instant Pot. If I had to choose one or the other, I would have to choose the Instant Pot. Even though I probably use the Vitamix equally as much, if not maybe a little more. The one tool that I couldn't be without is my immersion blender. I probably use that as often because, if I have, and again, if this is, I have this on my YouTube channel, recipe for unfried beans that I make at least once a week. And it's really easy, but it's using that immersion blender for the beans. It's using it for Sometimes I'll puree soups at least once or twice a week. I'll puree a soup. And then in the summer, I'm constantly making salad dressings with the immersion blender. I couldn't be without it.
No, we used
So
to just like I transfer part of my stuff to the blender and then back. And once we picked up one of those, it's like, oh, this is heavenly.
yeah, it doesn't do quite the job. So like if I'm pureeing soup, I'm obviously putting it in the Vitamix is going to make a smoother puree. But I think that the immersion blender is good enough, and it's so much easier.
Yeah.
The other thing I have that is, I think it's worth the real estate. I don't have a large kitchen, but I think it's worth the space it takes up is I do have a food processor. And because we make all our own hummus so that we can have it oil free, and I've been experimenting a lot lately with different beans in hummus. I just found some black garbanzo beans and I just cooked them. I have no idea what they're going to taste like.
So, you just cooked them now?
I cooked them yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So I don't know if you've heard of Rancho Gordo, the bean company.
No.
Oh,
I don't think we have that.
They have a lot of heirloom beans that are kind of unusual. And so that's where I saw them and I thought, oh, I don't know whether this is going to be any good, but I wanted to try them. So, so that will probably be a upcoming YouTube video, is all the different beans that I've been using for hummus.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I would echo all of the devices you mentioned.
Yeah.
They all get like used, if not daily, multiple times a week in my kitchen.
Yeah.
And they're really not that expensive when you consider what they do and how they allow you to not have to spend money on processed foods.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then money on healthcare and things like that.
Well, that's just it. No, that's just it. It's like you look at the Vitamix is probably the most expensive item you mentioned.
Yeah,
everything else, and a good food processor usually runs you a couple $100s too. But it's just, they're worth their weight in gold for the money you save. Like not only just in buying processed foods, but also just healthcare down the line.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, you have a degree from the Campbell Center for Nutrition. Is that correct? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So walk me through. And I looked at that myself at some point, if I was interested in going down that path. So, what led you to that, and what are you doing with that?
Well, it's a 6-week course. I wouldn't say it's a degree, it's a certificate.
Right.
The thing is, you get a certificate from from them telling you that you've completed the course, but it doesn't actually certify you to do anything. Right. And I think that's one of the things that, legally, I looked into and legally I can't call myself a dietitian. Legally, I can't really even call myself. There is no legal definition for nutritionist. Actually, people who call themselves nutritionists, they're certified by whom, So I just make it clear in my coaching that yes, I know a lot, but I'm not a certified nutritionist. I don't need a license to tell people to eat fruits and vegetables. And any nutritional advice I give to people, very clear. It primarily comes from Dr. Michael Greger's nutritionfacts.org. That's when it really comes down to it, that's where the information I give people, it comes from. One of the things that I found really helpful about the Cornell certificate is that, even though it's like I knew everything because I'd watched a gazillion YouTube videos and I'd been watching, reading and watching Dr. Greger's videos for years. So I really had a sense. But what they actually had you do was write little papers, which I kind of resented at first. But what it did was it gave me the language that I needed to talk about things. So when it comes to, because one of the things they wanted me to to do is explain diabetes to somebody who was just diagnosed in one of these, in a few paragraphs. And that made me really sit down and think, okay, now how am I gonna explain this to somebody? And it was like, oh yeah, this was a good exercise, because now I have the language that I need to talk to somebody about what diabetes is and how it works.
Yeah, that's great. It puts you on the. So how do you work when you coach other people? Like, what's it work? Someone gets in touch with you, and then what are your first steps for coaching somebody?
Okay, yeah, I specialize in working with people who have had a long history of overeating, dieting, losing weight, gaining it back. That they've been struggling with food for a long time. One of the things that I'm really very careful about is we're not going to go on a diet and lose weight right away, because anybody can help you lose weight. I can say, eat what I eat, and you'll lose weight, and you probably will. But one of the things that I think is vitally important is that you own your food choices. You're not eating this because I've told you to eat it or because I've told you not to eat it. It's because I've given you the facts, and then you make your own decision. And I think that that's critical. So one of the things that we start with is mindfulness and mindful eating, because I don't think you're going to get anywhere without it. And with that comes self-compassion, because if you've been overweight for a long period, you've absorbed that all the bullying, all the epithets that have been thrown at you on the street. And, most people who are overweight have had people yell at them on the street. And, you start absorbing that, and it's actually called internalized oppression for any marginalized group. There is that. And that has to go. That kind of aggressiveness that you have toward yourself, even, I don't care if you're 300 pounds and your knees are killing you, and, you really need to start with self-compassion as you are in this moment. And, I know people are saying to me, but wait a minute, why should I, you're telling me I need to be compassionate to myself, and I'm fat? You know what? You be compassionate to yourself because you're a human being on this planet and you deserve it. So let's start where you are. I mean, even if your life is a hot mess, start where you are, Okay, let's start with being compassionate to the hot mess.
Yeah, I love that. And a lot of people I follow too, they talk about that idea is like, there's no one size health solution. It's just like, it's so specific to every individual and what baggage you come with, what your story is, what your history is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, so we start with this sort of self-compassion piece. And I really feel that patience is important, because you can't run a marathon at a sprinter's pace. There's just no end. Life is a marathon. And so what we have to do is sort of cultivate a little bit of compassion and kindness, and realize that this is not going to be, and I think that one of the things that a lot of commercial diets do is they make you think it's going to be fast and easy. And, people do lose weight. I mean, I can't believe I've seen some commercial diet thing on television, and, they had like fried ravioli. They have a picture of fried ravioli that they're like two tiny little pieces. I'm thinking you're going to eat that and you're going to be starving. But,
Yeah.
That's the whole portion control thing that doesn't work. Of course, this is about the food, but it's not all about the food, which is why, I have a program that works more holistically than just food. And it has to. One of the things I have, which I run every few months, I have a class, an online class that is called Breaking the Food Seduction, One Mindful Bite at a Time. And it's a basic introduction. It's a 3-session class. I'll be running it again, I think, in April. And it's essentially, we first talk about the neuroscience. about how food works in your brain and how it creates dopamine. And that's really how you get addicted. And it's fat, sugar, and salt. And it doesn't matter whether it's the most delectable gourmet food, farm to table, locally produced, organic. If it's got a lot of fat, sugar, and salt in it, it's just as addictive as a Big Mac or a bag of Doritos. It's just because what fat, sugar, and salt does to our brains is it lights up those same neural pathways that heroin is lighting up. So we spend some time. I'm not super scientific, but I want to give the facts on how this operates. And then we look at how mindfulness practice can really start to help to address this. I do a little bit on habit change, because that's kind of the next class new class that I'm developing that will be starting in May, is Habit Change 101. And we're looking at how to really, I want people to take the emphasis off of weight loss and put it on health. Because it's like, Dr. Greger says, the goal here is not to be buried in a skinnier casket. The goal is to get yourself healthy. And so the question is, you want to be healthy. Okay, what do you want to do with that health? Let's look at that. And so we look at some really, what I think is more sensible goal setting than a lot of people tend to do, and how then you can build habits around that in a patient way to make you to help you change your habits. So that'll be another 3-session class that I'll be running in May.
Okay, great.
So I have the online classes. The other thing I'm going to be starting hopefully next month in March is group coaching. So it will be small groups. I'm going to have one group during the day and one group in the evening, so that it can accommodate different schedules. And it'll be no more than 6 people per group, because what I want to do is provide a safe place. And again, that will be 4 months. Month 1, we will be focusing on mindfulness practices, and what I like to call is building the mindfulness muscle. So that it's kind of like you go to the gym and you're lifting weights, but you're not doing it to lift weights better. You're doing it so that when you go home, it's easier to carry groceries in the house, and it's easier to mow your lawn, and it's, or whatever else you want to do. And the meditation is the same thing. You're not doing it so you're getting better at sitting on the cushion. You're doing it so you're getting better at staying present with everything else that you're doing, including the food that you're eating. I do think a problem a problem defined is a problem half solved. So in order to get to the roots of the problem and to start addressing it, you first have to know exactly what it is.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I find that myself. That was because I yo-yo dieted for years, until finally, like, it was once up here shifted, then it was like everything else just fell into place. It was like once where the mind goes, the body follows and whatnot.
Right. Right.
And so one conversation I've been having a lot with people too is, like, a lot of people have this mentality that it's like, well, once I just get to the finish line of what weight loss or health, whatever, is like, it'll be easy. It's like, I just got to get there. Well, that's just it. And it's like, and I had that mentality too. I'm like, well, I'm exercising every day for half an hour, but it's like, one day I won't have to do this anymore. And the one thing I've realized is, that's not true. And also I'm okay with it. I don't mind exercising now. But what do you find is, kind of the hardest thing, but also like kind of your tricks to maintaining this lifestyle that you have now?
Well, I've gotten to the point that it's sort of second nature.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go back to anything. I mean, it's like, I think the whole idea, and I think a lot of the diet mentality stems from commercial diets where they put you on a diet and then you go on maintenance. But you need to be on maintenance from the beginning, and so it's not about just like you have a goal. James Clear says it really well in the Atomic Habits. If you have a goal to run a marathon, or you want to run a marathon, the goal isn't to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. Because if you focus so much on running the marathon and you forget to becoming a runner, you finish your marathon and then you give up.
Yeah.
And then you burned out and you stopped. Whereas if your goal is actually to become a runner, and the same thing, I think, is my goal, which is why I want to take the goal off of weight loss, because my goal is to be healthier.
Yeah. Someone said that in the last interview I did too. It was the same mentality. I love that kind of continuity of thought, because I agree in that same.
Yeah. So my goal is to make healthier choices. And, we got some, we have a Mexican restaurant here that has a really, I can't say extensive vegan menu, but it's fairly, and, it's just one of those days that it was pick up some food on the way home day. And I got my vegan plate, but there was a little bag of chips with it, tortilla chips. And I hadn't had them in a long time. So I ate like 3 of them. And I was like, why am I eating these? They're not even good anymore. I'm not crazy about them, and I don't want to get my taste back for them. So I gave them to my husband. I was like, here, you can you can have them. He was happy to have them. But it was like I didn't even want them. And even though I probably could have a bag of chips in the house now and eat them moderately, at least for a while, but why? I mean, I have no desire to go back to my old eating habits. None.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah. I found I have a balance. We every now and then we'll have some chips and whatnot, but it's not the way it used to be. It's like I kind of like make my little bowl. I usually mix it with like butter, popcorn that has nothing on it, and it's just that's it. And I don't go back and fill it up again or whatever it is. But I've had that same thing where we'll go out and we'll get like a pastry, even though it's vegan and gluten free or whatever it needs to be. But it's like I have it in like 3 bites in. I'm just like, ugh, it's not. You're chasing that old memory sometimes of that thing, and then you realize, I'm like, why I'm not even enjoying this. Why am I doing this?
Right. That's a good way of putting it. You're chasing an old memory, and that's actually a big part of the mindfulness piece that I teach too, is because we have all these cues that come to us, and they're triggering memories and they're triggering past experiences. I mean, if you saw a picture of a chocolate cake and you'd never had chocolate cake, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be giving any physiological reaction. But the reason you're having that look, you're looking solicitously at that picture of a chocolate cake is because you've had an experience with it. So,
yeah. Someone came to my door. My dog's barking in the background.
Okay.
I'll put my mic off in a second. So, as we kind of wrap this up, what would you say some of your top tips are for someone who is about to start on a similar journey?
Be patient with yourself. And one of the things, stop beating yourself up. Because if beating yourself up for eating too much of anything were going to help you change your behavior, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it actually worked. So I think being kind to yourself, being patient with yourself is really, that's the number one thing. To look at mistakes, to look at just what they are. They're mistakes. I think what too many people do is they overeat once or eat the wrong things. And then they end up beating themselves up and think, what the heck, I can't do this. Rather than just kind of sitting back and saying, okay, you know what? I just ate this half a container of cookies. And what did I learn from it?
Yeah.
I learned something from this. I learned that I don't really like them as much. I learned that I don't feel well after I eat them, whatever it is. Just whatever I learned from it. I learned that I can't have them in the house. So I've learned something, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to move forward rather than kicking myself for making a mistake. And I've seen a lot of people have come to me and they talk to me, oh, I went to a Christmas party and I ate a cookie. Okay, you ate a cookie? You only ate one? Did you go home and eat a whole bag? No, it's like, okay, let's I think sometimes what we need to do is, rather than looking at perfection, that let good enough be good enough. I mean, that's kind of the other piece of being kind to yourself is, especially if you're just starting out.
Yeah. And not having that all or nothing mentality, right?
Right. I think the all or nothing mentality is what trips a lot of people up. And like for me, and that's where mindfulness comes in, because like for me, we get these big chocolate bars from Trader Joe's. They're pound plus, and we've got them in the house. I'm not thinking about them, and maybe once or twice a week I have a little square. Yeah. And I know from having paid attention that if I eat more than one little square, it's too much. Even though sometimes one little square tastes like I want another one, but I know that I don't. But I'm not thinking about it the rest of the time. If we had a bag of potato chips in the house, I would be thinking about it. And I would just eat them until they were gone. So that's where paying attention. And, there are just some things that you're not going to be able to control yourself with. And, some things you can. And different people have different things that they can control themselves with. I have clients who can't have dates in the house because they'll eat the whole thing. I have clients who can't have figs. Now, I'm one person, I can have dates, but I can't have figs. I just think the figs are spectacularly good. I love the fact that there's just a little bit of tartness. I mean, the dates are just sweet, but the figs have just this little hint of tartness in them that just triggers me. So I know I can't have I can't have figs in the house.
No, it's important knowing what your triggers are, and
Right.
But also knowing enough about yourself that it's like, I don't have that ability, right?
Right.
I mean, not any different than any other kind of addiction that people have. It's just going, whether it's an unhealthy relationship or drugs or smoking, whatever it is, like, just, I can't have it near me. I don't have that amount of self-control. And it's not a weakness. That's just being a human.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's right. It's just the way we're wired. Yeah. And it's not a weakness. So
yeah, it's just being human.
Yeah. So know what your triggers are, clean up your environment, and just, I also think that especially if you're going out, figure out what your limits are. If you want to go out and socialize with your friends and go to a restaurant, that you'll eat no animal flesh, but you might eat eggs and cheese. Or my particular is that it all has to be vegan. If I'm out at a restaurant, it doesn't necessarily have to be salt and oil free, but I want no animal products in it.
Yeah, that's right. I like to do my research before I go to a restaurant. It's like, I see what they have, what they don't. And I'm like, and if all they have is a salad, great. I'll eat a big snack or something before I go and just let it be about being with my friends.
Yeah. Now, I live in the Boston area, so we have tons of vegetarian restaurants or vegan restaurants, and almost every restaurant has some vegan options.
Yeah, we're lucky now.
Yeah. Yeah. But I have a client who lives in a much more rural area and doesn't have that available to her. So, and I have to tell you, if you're in a restaurant and they have pizza, and that's all they, order it without the cheese.
They have all this stuff to make it vegan. It's just
Yeah,
eliminated.
I mean, you can have all kinds of vegetables on it and just say no cheese. You know? So.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Oh,
All
well,
the
thank you
information,
for inviting me.
yeah, all the
It was great.
information for those watching, whether you're watching this before or after, all the information for Karen is down below. So you can check out her YouTube channel, her website, and a bunch of other wonderful links that she's given us. And as she mentioned, so this spring you're hosting a couple more groups, workshops, and whatnot. So
Right.
maybe you give us one more plug for those things.
Okay. Well, yeah, if you go to my my website, just haven't quite got the group coaching up yet, but that's going to happen pretty quickly because we're going to start in March, the second week in March, and it's really sign up for it, and it'll be happening again in the fall if you miss the window to sign up for it. But that's a 4-month program. And then that's group coaching. I'll be running my Breaking the Food Seduction class again in April. And that's a 3-session in-person class with videos that you watch on your own. And then the Habit Change 101 will start in May. So yeah, lots going on.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for all those who are watching now or after the fact. Please give the channel a like and a subscribe if you haven't already. Go check out Karen's YouTube channel and send her some love as well. And thanks for joining.
Okay, thanks.